I seasoned them heavily, and now I'm going to get them basically fully cooked while I prep my vegetables. Traditional recipes often call for a grated onion.
Today guys, we're going to be reviewing Adam's Pocket Paella, and I have hopes that this video is going to be a lot better than the last two that we've reviewed. If you are new, welcome. My name is James Makinson. I've been cooking for many years in the United States, England, France, and Spain. And if you would like any other recipes, I have them on my YouTube channel, so feel free to check them out. So before we get going, be sure to, if you like the video, be sure to like the video down below, subscribe, blah, 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 and well, let's get started.
So what I'm trying to do here is get as close as possible to a traditional Valencian paella, while at the same time, I'm keeping everything super fast and quick and small. It's a weeknight paella with a manageable ingredient list for a typically small contemporary household. Spain's national dish here was originally invented to feed massive teams of farmhands, which is why paella is traditionally cooked in these giant specialized paella pans, which is technically redundant because paella means pan in Valencian. But anyway, I'm just using a 10-inch or 25-centimeter diameter sauté pan. That'll feed mom and dad and 2 little kids, but if you need more food, you could double my quantities and use a 12-inch pan. The defining spice and coloring, of course, is saffron, the painstakingly harvested stigma and styles of certain crocus flowers. Quite expensive, but you only need a pinch. That sachet was 1/8 of a gram, and honestly, I could have used half of it for this much food.
If you're going to be adding saffron, you don't need to add a lot to the paella, and I would add less than what he's adding to it. It's extremely expensive, and a little bit will go a very long way.
Lots of the recipes I've read from Spain tell you to toast the saffron, sometimes in a dry pan like I'm doing here. Sometimes they do it in the hot oil later on. I'm not sure this intensifies the flavor as much as promised, but it's easy to do, so let's go with it. Out it goes into my microwave-safe measuring jug, and while some recipes tell you to bash it up in a mortar and pestle, I'm just going to do as much as I can with my finger. I'm using 2 total cups of liquid, just under half a liter, and half of that is going to be plain water. Check how powerful that pigment is already. Saffron will stain your clothes, your countertops. Be careful with it.
Saffron has a very big counterfeit market. Most of the saffron that's on the market, or a majority of it, is fake. You need to be careful whether you're buying the real thing or not. And a quick way on testing this is by taking a cup of hot water and putting the saffron in it. And if you see the saffron starting to bleed or the color starting to like explode, the threads are losing its color, then it's fake. Because real saffron will not discolor the water so much, and it will retain the color on the threads. And you don't even want to know some of the things that they make fake saffron out of. So it's better to check and make sure, and that you're buying from a reliable source, than to just buy it from somebody that you don't know online.
The other half of my liquid is going to be white wine because it's me, but I've read lots of Spanish recipes that do use some wine, so of course you could use stock instead, and I'm just going to heat this for a couple of minutes in the microwave.
We do add wine to things here in Spanish cuisine. I've never added wine though to my paella, never. You can add it if you want. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or anything like this, but in Spanish cooking we don't use as much white wine in cooking as we do in, say, French cuisine. When I was in France, we used a lot. Here in Spain, not that much. But I would be adding a stock. He should be adding either vegetable or chicken stock to this instead of just water and wine, because it imparts more flavor into the dish, because the rice will absorb that flavor and then it will be even more flavorful.
Again, tradition has it that steeping the saffron in hot liquid will help you extract more out of it. Eventually, it's going into hot liquid anyway in the pan, so I'm not convinced this makes a big difference, but again, it's easy, especially if you use the microwave, so sure. Pan is already hot, in goes some olive oil, and really, if you're using anything other than a real paella pan, you are making a mini paella, fun size. Therefore, it helps to think small with all of your ingredients, hence chicken wings. Traditional Valencian paella has big whole chunks of chicken, maybe thighs chopped in half, plus bone-in chunks of rabbit and or pork. You don't have to use any meat at all if you don't want to, but 6 or 8 chicken wings will give you that traditional vibe of bone-in, skin-on chicken pieces, but they'll cook much faster and they won't take up too much space in such a little pan.
So what Adam's doing here by searing the chicken before, this is very good. You want to do this in the pan if you're making like the paella valenciana. You can sear the chicken or the meat beforehand, get that nice color in it, and then you can prep the rest of the mise en place as you're cooking. Paella Valenciana, normally you add rosemary to it. and you can add it at whatever stage. But I like to add a little bit of like fragrant herbs as well. So you can add a little bit of rosemary to this while you're searing the chicken. And the rosemary will help impart more flavor into the chicken, the oils from the rosemary, and you'll have more fragrance, more aroma when cooking it.
I seasoned them heavily, and now I'm going to get them basically fully cooked while I prep my vegetables. Traditional recipes often call for a grated onion.
If you don't know the difference between an onion and a shallot, it is similar to an onion. It's a little sweeter than an onion though. You can substitute a shallot if you have to, of shallots. It'll just add a little bit of sweetness to the dish.
I'm using a shallot because I'm making a small quantity and I don't need a whole big onion. And I'm just finely mincing it because that's easier than grating it, and minced shallot cooks in seconds. I'm mincing it up with my garlic, a few cloves, as fine as reasonably possible. Skin-on chicken pieces are ready to flip when they release pretty easily from the pan. Very nice color on those. Again, I want these pretty much done before everything else goes in because they're really not going to stew for very long with the rice and everything.
He has a perfect color on the chicken wings. Absolutely perfect. You want that color on all sides of the chicken wings. Yes, if you can get that, it's wow, beautiful.
By the way, if I was doing a vegan version, I might fry some butter beans in the oil instead. Lima beans, canned and then drained. Limas are definitely traditional in paella, even though I'm skipping them today for the sake of simplicity. I'm also skipping the artichoke hearts, which I'd probably make time for if I wasn't also using meat. At my store, they sell these little sweet peppers in bulk, so that's what I'm using. A hot pepper would not be traditional and would overwhelm the saffron.
Traditionally, for the sofrito, bell peppers are very common. Yes, the big bell peppers that you see everywhere in the grocery stores. Bell peppers are like 0 on the Scoville units, which means that they're not hot at all. What he's using, I think, is called lipstick. It's another type of bell pepper, a sweet pepper. But you want to use a sweet pepper. You don't want to use a spicy pepper because paella is not supposed to be hot. It's not supposed to be super, super, super spicy.
So maybe dice up half a small bell pepper if you can't use one of these, or some of those little bottled diced pimentos would be good instead. And then my main veg is going to be a big handful of green beans that I bought bulk at the store. Very traditional in Valencian paella. I'm just cutting them in half to make them a little easier to eat and stir around.
What I would do though with the green beans, instead of adding them to the paella early, I would have a pot of boiling water. I would blanch them and then drop them in some ice water. We drop them in the ice water to stop the cooking process and to keep that crispness of the green beans. It'll keep the color, it'll keep them crispy, and then you can add the green beans for garnish at the end of the dish to add a little bit of color to the paella, because most of the colors in this dish are gonna be, after you cook everything, it's just gonna be brown. It's not gonna be very colorful. So if you have some bright green vegetables at the end, it adds a lot of color to it, and it's a nice garnish.
Again, butter beans and artichoke hearts would be traditional as well. Frozen peas work great. Put them in straight out of the freezer just when you're putting the rice in. Awesome.
He hasn't burned the pan after searing the chicken. This is what you want. If you can get it like this, where he hasn't burned it, then all the juices that have been rendered from the chicken wings from cooking and searing them will be then imparted into the dish. So there's more flavor. Very good.
And now that my chicken pieces are almost cooked through, I'm just softening up my sofrito in the pan. Spanish sofrito is onion, garlic, and sweet peppers, generally with tomato. Traditionally, you might grate some fresh whole tomatoes, discard the skins, and then cook that down with the other veg until it forms a thick, dark sauce. A paste of tomato, if you will, which is why I'm just using a squeeze of tomato paste, and I think it's going to taste pretty similar.
Adam's cheating a little bit with adding tomato paste. What you can do, instead of standing there with a grater or with a microplane and grating the tomatoes, it's laborious, yeah? Is by taking the tomato, deep hitting them, and then throwing them in your Thermomix, your Vitamix, whatever, and blending them into tomato sauce. And then you add that to make the sofrito, and then it will cook down and reduce. So if you don't have this, if you don't have tomatoes and you have a little bit of paste, you can cheat a little bit, but tomato paste is concentrated. So just keep this in mind. Yeah, a little goes a long way. And if you're not careful, you can easily burn it.
Traditionally, you might brown the green beans a little bit in the hot oil. To do a good job of that, I would really have to dump out the chicken and everything else first. Lots of paella recipes involve frying things in stages, in batches, taking them out and putting them back in again. I'm going for simplicity here, so I'm just giving the green beans like a 2-minute head start before I pour in my liquid.
If you're going to make this, my suggestion would be, instead of adding the saffron to the water in the beginning and then cooking it in the microwave, is to add the saffron now to the sofrito. because the flavor from the saffron will be released into the sofrito, into the dish, as you're mixing.
If you can't get saffron, by the way, just use like a teaspoon of sweet paprika. Lots of people use paprika in addition to the saffron. If I'm going to spring for the saffron, I want to taste it, and the taste is kind of subtle, so I'm just doing the saffron and nothing else. Salt.
Pimienton is what we call it here, paprika. You have pimienton dulce, or sweet paprika, and then pimienton picante. And then they have also, smoked and everything else. We use paprika a lot in making the sofrito and in making many other dishes. It not just imparts flavor into the dish, but it also helps to color it. When you go to some of the restaurants here in Barcelona or in Spain in general, you'll see that not all of them will have saffron in it, and they'll be extremely yellow. Some places will actually add a colorant to the paella, the same type of colorant that they add to American cheese. This is what they may add, and this is why you may see your paella super yellow. It's artificial. So depending on where you go, obviously it'll be like this. If you go to a good restaurant, you'll get an authentic paella in Barcelona. If you have any questions, then let me know.
I'm going to add salt to this broth until it tastes almost twice as salty as I want it. Why? Because it's going to donate tons of salt to the rice. Unwashed rice. We need the free starch coat clinging to the rice to bind this dish. Any short grain rice could work, like risotto rice. This is purportedly a real Spanish paella rice. It'll tell you on the bag how much liquid it can absorb. Some varieties absorb way more water than others. I'd say just follow whatever ratio is recommended on the package.
The big benefit of Bomba over a lot of other types of rice is that it's very forgiving. So it has normally a 3-to-1 ratio of water to rice, and if it overcooks, the rice kernels will not necessarily explode. A lot of other types of rice, like basmati, even arborio, if you overcook it, the little granules will just explode. Yes, they'll break. Bomba, not as easily. It's a little more forgiving. The other thing is that, unlike the risotto being super creamy, the paella should fall apart a little bit. It shouldn't have that creaminess to it.
I'm doing a cup of rice to 2 cups liquid. You really don't have to nail the ratio because we're going to have ample opportunity to either add water or boil it away later. Once you get the rice stirred in, some people cover it, some people don't, but either way, you just let it simmer and you never stir it again. This is the main difference between paella and risotto. Risotto you stir, you let that free starch coat and the particular starch composition of short grain rice thicken up that liquid until you have a nice creamy stew. Paella is more like a casserole than a stew. You just let it cook and set into one semi-solid mass. That's also perhaps a reason to steep the saffron ahead of time. You can't really stir it around and get it evenly distributed once the rice goes in.
It's very important to make sure that the rice lays flat, because if you look carefully, there are a few granules of rice that are above the beans and above the chicken or whatnot. And you can tell that because they're above the water line, that this core of the rice, the germ of the rice, is still white. If it's white, it's not cooked, it's undone. So, like Joshua Weissman's paella that was about this thick, if it's this thick, the rice on the bottom is going to cook more than the rice on top because the rice on top is not absorbing the liquid. So you want the paella to be about 1 inch, more or less, about 1 inch. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a little bit of crunchy rice here, the rice is down here, etc., etc. I would say that if you're going to be making this paella, then you should add about half of the amount that he has added to this size pan. It's too small for 4 people.
When the rice grains have all plumped up a bit, you can just reach in and taste them to assess their doneness. If they're still kind of crunchy, you can easily just drizzle some extra water wherever needed. Maybe season the water first, just to be safe. I still had some saffron lining that jug, and I'll just drizzle some of that wherever I seem to have dry patches. If, on the other hand, you seem to have put in too much water relative to the rice, that's okay too, because here's the last step. When the rice is still a little undercooked, you jack up the heat to boil out any excess water, thus allowing you to create the socarrat. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that the way that you would in Valencia, but the socarrat is this layer of browned fried rice at the bottom of the paella. On my stove, which is not super powerful, I find that I need to crank the burner all the way up and then just use my nose. You can smell when the browning happens, and then I might pull it off the heat when I just start to smell burning. I use that same trick when I'm making pan pizza on the stovetop. off it comes, and then like any casserole, you really got to let it rest for at least 15 minutes before scooping. Give that starch matrix time to cool and solidify a bit. If you need to keep it warm for a long time, apparently it's traditional to cover this with a damp towel, though I'm sure a lid would be fine. When it's time to scoop, I recommend something wide and rigid that will allow you to really scrape that sauerkraut off the bottom. For my taste, I think I could have left that on the high heat for even longer. That brown layer on the bottom is widely regarded as the best bit of the paella.
He got the sauerkraut. Yeah, that's not bad. You want a light caramelization on it. You can go further and get more of a caramelization, but if you can at least get it to this stage, this is good.
You might be wondering, where's the seafood? Well, apparently seafood is not very traditional in Valencian paella, which in Valencia they would say is the traditional paella. Again, I'm going for simple here, so I'm happy to leave out ingredients, though I'm definitely doing the traditional lemon wedge served on the side. You squeeze that over to your liking. See, heterogeneity in food is not just something Ragusea made up. It's part of so many great traditional foods. For example, the use of bone-in meat chunks or bivalves still in their shells. That makes it so that you're not just scooping porridge into your face. There's little bits within the dish that you pick up and you eat in a very different way. Little dishes within the dish. I like that in a paella. And one more time, I know this is not traditional paella. Nobody in Spain needs to lose their mind about this. I'm just saying this is pretty close to the traditional while still being as quick and as user-friendly as Squarespace, the paella of website builders. Feel like I covered my bases with this one in terms of identifying which elements are traditional and which ones are not, but I don't know, let's just go check the comments, shall we? Oh!
Overall, I have to say that Adam did his research and he did a lot better than the last two videos that we've done. If you actually compare all the paellas back to back, of course there are different types of paellas, but no, he did really, really good, and I will definitely be watching more of his videos because he does pretty good. I like it. Yeah, it's very technical with everything. Anyway, if you did learn something or if you did like the video, then be sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe and share as well. And if you are interested in another interesting video, then I would highly suggest clicking on this one here, and I will see you guys again very soon. Take care.